All right, Lies of P is the closest thing to Bloodborne 2 yet. Here we go.
Bloodborne kind of broke me. Hear me out. It didn't just break me in the screw this boss, this game is hard as hell, I give up kind of way, like it, invariably breaks everyone who has started or rolled credits on Bloodborne. Yeah. That's part of the whole fun of it. No, it broke me because it completely raised the bar on what a third-person action horror game could be, and I've honestly been chasing that high ever since.
I do think that's very true. That, like, the From Software games play so well and are so well designed that every time that I play a game that's not a From Software game, I always see the massive, like, difference in quality. Like, you can't play Sekiro and then go play Elden Ring and then swap over to play anything else.
Is until I played Lies of P, the brand new Soulslike. No, it's not just a Soulslike. Until I played Lies of P, the brand new Bloodborne cover album from a relatively unknown South Korean studio called Round 8. Lies of P isn't
I think it's really impressive that this is like kind of a relatively unknown studio that's come out with probably one of the most well-designed Souls-like games ever.
Than Bloodborne, and it never truly reaches the same highs for me, but it comes close enough. And in a world where we tragically still don't have a Bloodborne 2, I will take it. So let's celebrate Bloodborne and its brand new baby brother, Lies of P.
Lies of P is the closest thing we have to Bloodborne 2.
First though, let's do
I would say this is probably true, by the way. I think this is an accurate thing to say. Lords of the Fallen versus Lies of P, which is better? I think Lies of P is a better game. I like the aesthetic of Lords of the Fallen a lot more, but Lies of P is a better game. The reason why is because all of the problems with Lies of P are also in Lords of the Fallen. Like, Lords of the Fallen also has badly telegraphed attacks. It also has, like, hitboxes that don't really make sense. It also has bullshit like that. So, like, Lies of P has the same thing, so it's like, okay, well, what are we really comparing here?
Quick recap of how we got to the point where a game so openly lifting Bloodborne's whole entire shtick is even worth celebrating to begin with. Lies of P isn't the first game to try and give FromSoft a run for their money in the genre FromSoft invented. Far from it, actually. During the 13-year stretch between 2009's Demon's Souls and 2022's Elden Ring, all sorts of other game studios got in on the Soulsborne genre with their own take on things. So much so that we had to create the new term Soulslike, a new label for Souls games that were not...
Code Vein, by the way, was a really good game. I played this myself, and I was actually surprised at how much some bullshit catboy anime weeb game was actually very well designed. And it's like, a lot of people probably meme on it because of its setting and like the style, but the actual gameplay in itself was incredibly impressive.
For Souls games that were not made by the studio that makes Souls games, FromSoft.
Jedi Fallen Order, I did not play the first one. I only played the second one. I would say at least Jedi Survivor. You think Jedi games are 10s? I think that it was like an 8.5 to an 8. I think that it was good, but I don't think it was that good. It was like an 8. That's where I'm at.
Let's go through them. There was The Surge, which was Future Souls with robot parts. Neo, which was Samurai Souls, Assault and Sanctuary. The side-scrolling Soul.
I look forward to playing this. I will play this game. I bought it, and I just haven't played it yet.
Remnant, which was first person.
Remnant is an incredible, amazing game. I would recommend it to anybody. Remnant 2 is, in my opinion, probably a better game than Remnant 1. However, Remnant 1 is also still worth playing. It has hitboxes that are so accurate and so precise that I thought I was missing my shots because the hitboxes were broken. And whenever I looked at frame by frame, I realized that my bullet was in between an NPC's legs, and it missed it. Like, my respect for the developer for that, like, just went up so much. This game is actually like a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 quality game. It is incredible.
Souls, we had Star Wars Souls, Souls of the Fallen.
Lords of the Fallen. Oh, yeah, Lords of the Fallen. Yeah, we played this. As I said, I just didn't really think it was... I think a lot of games misunderstand why From Software games are so good. And they make them hard instead of making them fun and fulfilling. They just add in, like, and I think this is what Dark Souls 2 kind of did. is Dark Souls 1, whenever it came out, is that everybody was making it all about how hard Dark Souls was. So like Dark Souls 2, they tried to make it even harder. But like, I don't think that's the way that you make a game fun. That's not like the way you make a game enjoyable. Because people can make the game harder on their own by doing like a Soul Level 1 run or doing other stuff. Like Dark Souls 2 just had like cheap difficulty. And I feel like Lords of the Fallen also had cheap difficulty. And Lies of P had this as well. I think this is a problem that a lot of these games run into. But at the same time, Lies of P, I think the other things that it had besides that were much better.
The Eldest Souls, which literally had souls in its title, and tons and tons and tons more. Like so many more. But none of them were really specifically trying to be like Bloodborne. That's the thing, we've had dozens of Souls-like.
Which game is trying to be like Bloodborne? I think the closest thing that we have to another game being like Bloodborne is there's like a 2D scroller game that's very much like Bloodborne now. I forgot what it was called. It was like the First Forsaken or something like that. I don't remember what it was. But yeah, apparently Last Faith. Yeah, there you go, Last Faith. And like that's the only other one that we've had so far. And Blasphemous, I think, is kind of like Bloodborne as well.
But next to no Born likes. Lies of P is the first game to really try and tap into the specific energy, pacing, and game feel of Bloodborne. You know, game feel, that weirdly intangible texture or flavor that specific games or franchises have that make them special. Like, you feel it when you jump in Mario, throw an axe in God of War, and dodge, roll, run, and attack in Bloodborne. It's different than in Dark Souls, and it's different than in nearly every other Souls-like. People like me really love Bloodborne. Sure, like it only sold a couple of million units, and it's landlocked as a console exclusive on the PlayStation 4.
That's so weird.
On PS5 as well, but that hasn't stopped hardcore Bloodborne fans from obsessing over it for years. There's a massive art and cosplay community around it. A fan-made PS1 demake.
I remember seeing
this. A fan-made Bloodborne kart racing game. And every PlayStation showcase and state of play presentation is preceded by an army of pitchfork-wielding Bloodborne.
This is the time, guys. Hey. This is the time they're going to announce Bloodborne for PS5. They're remaking it. It's going to be Bloodborne 2. It's coming to PS5. The graphics are going to be 60 FPS, guys. It's coming to PC this time for sure.
Bloodborne fans, like myself, demanding a 4K 60 frames per second remaster of the game, to the point that some people just said, F it, and they made it themselves.
They did the opposite.
People love Bloodborne. For reasons we'll never really know, it never got a sequel, spin-off, or spiritual successor. That is, until Lies of P launched.
Well, the reason why it didn't get a successor is because it didn't need one. The story is one and done. That's it. Like, the ending of the story is the ending of the story. You could make a second Bloodborne, sure. But in a way, I always felt like we kind of deserve to not have one. That it exists for what it is, and that is what it is. It's the same as Sekiro. Yes, you could have expanded on different ways, things in Sekiro. Sure, you could have done that. And there was that hidden ending of the game that did imply that there was more to the story. But for the most part, the story basically ends. And I think that's what separates, again, that's what separates a studio that makes something as a work of art from a studio that makes something as a method of making money, right? Is that, of course, From Software could print money by making Bloodborne 2. But they haven't done it yet. Maybe they will. And if they do, I'll be happy. But if they don't, I will totally understand.
This year as a love letter to Bloodborne. So what makes Bloodborne and Lies of P so similar? Well, for starters, both games feature a character with a gun-like weapon in their left hand and a big-ass, sharp, upgradable weapon in their right hand.
Yeah.
They both have you creeping around cobblestone streets where overturned carriages, rotting horse carcasses, and dead bodies litter the once...
It's the aesthetic, too. They both have, like, a Gothic Victorian-era aesthetic. I think that's probably the biggest way that people can just, like, immediately see, oh, this is like Bloodborne.
Bustling neighborhoods now overrun with nightmarish approximations of townspeople. They both make you stop off at glowing beacons to save and then warp back to a safe area to level up with the help of an emotionless woman dressed like a weird Victorian doll before heading back out to explore dense forests, creaky workshops, and colossal towers riddled with murderers leaking from the shadows and grotesque hulking bosses ready to pound you to smithereens with cartoonishly large hammers. And both games let you do it all while wearing a big dark trench coat and a weird but lovable animal mask. In case you don't want to see your hunter's eyes, or in Liza P's case, you don't feel like looking at a bootleg Timothy Chalamet for dozens of hours. Who does? I mean, some of you, I guess.
What have you done lately, oh great artiste?
See, Bloodborne had what I like to call the secret sauce, the juice, you know, the blood vials or whatever. It took all of the magic that FromSoft had been working into the Dark Souls and Demon Souls games and made it quicker, snappier, and more terrifying.
Well, I think also one reason why Bloodborne was good is because it played incredibly well. And this is something that I feel like a lot of people don't put enough emphasis on. Is that these games play extremely well. And it's the one thing that's probably the hardest thing to do, but it's the most important. Like, how many of these Souls-like games just have bullshit difficulty? Or they have bad design, or fucked up hitboxes? People play these games for the combat. People play these games for that kind of stuff. It's like having an anime game and not having big booba characters. Why the fuck do you think people are here?
And like Bloodborne, Liza P just moves quicker too.
Yeah,
Themes and environments aside, Bloodborne and Liza P are simply built around faster traversal and combat. Sure, you know, some of the old school Dark Souls heads miss the heavier, more stoic approach to Souls games, but Bloodborne's reliance on gothic horror themes over evil Playmobil castles totally won me over. Now, since Bloodborne launched in 2015, FromSoft has continued to evolve the Souls genre with games like Dark Souls 3, Sekiro, and Elden Ring, which all up the ante in brilliant ways, and I love them all, but none of them connected with me on the same way that Bloodborne did. Elden Ring came closest with its near infinite options in weapon sets, stats, and playstyles, meaning I could get like damn near...
Well, like Bloodborne had the thing where you can do damage to get your health back. I think that was like one of the biggest differences with the game, and it just rewarded you so much for being hyper aggressive, whereas in the other games, you didn't really have that kind of stuff. Also, there's no really defensive option in Bloodborne. Like, you don't have a shield. Like, you can't really realistically use a shield. You have to big dick the bosses.
Close.
There is a shield, yeah, but it doesn't work though, right? There is a shield, but like not really.
Feel like he plays like a Bloodborne hunter, but its emphasis on open world exploration and fast-paced yak horse travel, whatever Torn is just inherently different than, you know, tiptoeing around the dark and claustrophobic streets of Yharnam, a feeling that Liza P has almost completely recaptured for me. Now, there are some key differences, though, between Liza P and Bloodborne. Liza P doesn't tilt as hard into horror as Bloodborne does, although it does occasionally get close. Instead, it goes with a kind of steampunk theme, which ends up feeling less like Castlevania and Sleepy Hollow, and more like Bioshock and the City of Lost Children. Liza P...
Yeah, I think that's probably accurate. There are, like, some horror aspects of the game, but, like, not really. Like, for example, the Archduke, I think, was definitely a horror area and a horror level, but for the most part, he's right.
Largely trades Bloodborne's organic approach to enemies, you know, wolves, spiders, mangled mares, for mechanical ones, opting to more frequently give the player gnashing, chirping robots to tear apart. You do eventually fight some more beast-like enemies, but Liza P's story, influenced almost entirely by the original 1883 The Adventures of Pinocchio book by Carlo Collodi, is one of robot puppet servants revolting against the real people, mostly killing them and then stalking the streets at night.
Fuck.
But one of the biggest differences is that Liza P is generally just an easier game than Bloodborne. It's definitely still tough, and there are definitely some...
Do I think Liza P is easier than Bloodborne? It's so hard to say. I don't know. Bloodborne is easier? Well, because, like, so you can say Liza P is easier if you, like, the consumables in Liza P are very strong. And if you use a lot of them, you'll probably be able to beat any boss that you want with, like, relative ease. Yeah, I'll definitely say this, that Bloodborne has a much better form of difficulty than Liza P does.
Big pain in the ass bosses that will beat you down and make you almost throw your controller.
Yeah.
But there's nothing in Liza P as tough as Bloodborne's Orphan of Kos or Lawrence the First Vicar. It even got a pretty significant patch that made a bunch of bosses even easier recently, and your weapons even tougher, while simultaneously reducing the weight of the main character's weapons and secondary items, making it easier to go through the game without getting over-encumbered and slowed down by all your stuff. And Bloodborne never really got anything on that level. They made the loading times quicker. Thanks.
I don't know. I'm trying to think about it. Old Hunter's pretty big jump in difficulty, so it kind of depends. I think Elbridis and Gurman are on the same level of difficulty as like Ludwig, or I think Gurman's about as hard as Lady Maria. Personally, I think they're about the same difficulty. And I actually, I don't really think Orphan of Kos. Yeah, Orphan of Kos is probably the hardest boss in the game. I think Lawrence is pretty easy too. Ludwig is way harder. I don't think so, man. I really just don't. Because like the difference is that with Ludwig, the second phase is so easy. Like, yeah, the first phase is harder, but like the second phase is a joke. Orphan is the hardest boss in the entire Soulslike franchise? I don't think so. Never played a single Souls-like game. Do you think games should start with Elden Ring? I'd say Dark Souls 1. Play Dark Souls 1 first. I don't know. Like, that's my experience playing the game. The thing is, like, what I'm saying is that I do think the difficulty in Bloodborne was much better than the difficulty in Lies of P. Like, whenever I would die in Bloodborne, I would realize that I made a mistake or I did something wrong. In Lies of P, it was, like, mostly around, like, knowing what the timing and the feints are in the fight. Like Lies of P, I felt more like I was playing against the developer who was trying to play tricks on me, making me think that the boss was like resetting their position, and then they do another attack right after that. It's like super fast. Like that's the way I felt about the game. So like I think that the bosses were actually like the weakest point of Lies of P because of how, in my opinion, unfair they were. And they were very hard. But I don't think that difficulty translated to, like, quality or enjoyment.
Because at launch, it was like a minute and a half every time you died. And you died a lot.
Still lingering about.
Additionally, Lies of P is smaller in scope. It's a slightly shorter game if you're just sticking to the main story. More importantly, though, it doesn't really have much in the way of optional content, like large-scale secondary areas and bosses that aren't part of the progression through the Golden Path. Bloodborne...
maybe that's probably true. Yeah, Martyr Logarius, you don't really have to go to whatever that castle is. You're right about that. Overall, though, I think that Lies of P was a very in-depth game. And I think it was a very long game. There was a lot of content to it. And Lies of P, that Canehurst, yeah, there you go. Like, for example, think about all the different types of mobs that Lies of P had. Isn't that incredible? Because, like, a lot of games, at least nowadays, they have, like, very, very minimal mob variety. There's like nothing. There's like maybe 10 different mobs in the game, and like each, area is like just different variations of them. Like Lies of P did an incredible job with adding multiple different types of mobs into the game, and even incorporating boss mobs as like mini bosses later on. Like, for example, like the Fat Clown.
Eventually got the Old Hunters DLC, a massive, awesome expansion that added a bunch of new areas, bosses, and weapons, and I'm really hoping Lies of P gets something similar, not because the core game is lacking or anything, far from it really. It took me like 40 hours to roll credits on Lies of P. I really took my time with it, and that was with lots of backtracking to grind my stats up and find most of its hidden items and weapons. No, I want more Lies of P because I think it's awesome, and it's more likely to get DLC than Bloodborne is to get a...
Yeah, I want to see them try to make another game. I do, because I think that what they did with Lies of P was really, really good, and I want to see them do it again. Because I think that they probably, like, it's very common what I've said that was critical of the game. Like, I've looked on the subreddit, I've seen other videos talking about the game, and a lot of people have said the same thing I've said. So I think that we can probably see them adapt to that, at least to an extent, with, like, DLC or another game.
Remaster, remake, or sequel, although I will never stop asking and praying for those things.
Farewell, good hunter.
But it's not just that Lies of P pays a mean tribute to Bloodborne. Lies of P actually does some stuff better than Bloodborne. Don't kill me on this one. Bloodborne is kind of light on story and heavy on lore, the stuff in the margins that you kind of need to dig around for to appreciate. Bloodborne's got tons of that. While Lies of P puts his story more front and center with a great script and lots of cinematics to bring it all together. Also, and again, hear me out on this before you behead me with a whirly gaze.
I'm not sure really if I liked the story of Lies of P really all that much. I thought it was okay. But I think there should have been like more of an exposition of like what Simon Manus was trying to do, personally. Because I think that a lot of those nuances that really make a story very good, I didn't really feel like I got them.
Saw or a threaded cane, I think Lies of P has a deeper and more nuanced weapon system. Let's start with your left-handed
Yeah, I agree with
projectile
that.
weapon, known as your Legion Arm, which can be
Yeah,
swapped
that's
out
true.
and upgraded to various effects and perks. I played most Eliza P with an arm weapon called the Puppet String, which works somewhat like
yeah.
Scorpion's Chain from Mortal Kombat, quickly pulling enemies towards you and you towards them once you upgrade it with big, powerful attacks to boot. Bloodborne's left-hand weapons, on the other hand, are, I guess the same hand, are mostly pistols, shotguns, blunderbusses, rifles. They're fun as hell, but they're somewhat limited in terms of how you can tweak and improve them aside from stats. And
There is more of a scope of the kind of weapons that you can use in Lies of P versus Bloodborne. Definitely. Bloodborne is very narrow in the things that you can do. And you do obviously have like certain extremes, like the Moonlight Greatsword, the Whirligig, basically mace, right? But for the most part, you're doing the same thing.
And there's also your main right-hand
I
weapons
had.
in Lies of P,
Right
and
there.
that's where things get really interesting. Lies of P technically has fewer weapons than Bloodborne overall, but it does something unique with them. Most of the weapons in Lies of P can literally be dismantled into two components, a blade and a handle. So you can then mix and match those components to make new weapons, which can be upgraded on their own, tweaking attack stats and attributes along the way. This basically means that there's kind of like infinite or nearly infinite weapon combinations in Lies of P, which leads to some really cool varieties in character performance and playstyle.
Yeah, I remember whenever the game came out, a lot of people were like, oh, what are you using for your weapon? Oh, this guy's using this weapon. And, oh, we use this weapon with this handle. Like, I thought that was really cool whenever the game first came out.
Now, this ends up working really well in favor of Lies of P's emphasis on robot parts and steampunk aesthetics. There's a distinctly toyetic, kit-bashing kind of feel to the weapon system, and it helps Lies of P stands on its own, despite so much of the game feeling like a Bloodborne spiritual successor, or like I said before, a cover album. It's the kind of evolution that you would expect FromSoft themselves to implement if we ever got an actual, official Bloodborne sequel, and again, since we haven't yet, I will gladly take it here in Lies of P. So there you have it. After years and years of seemingly dozens of video game developers trying their own take on Dark Souls, we finally have a game that's specifically showing some love to Bloodborne. It's not perfect, and it's not better, but it's doing enough of its own thing that I fell in love with it for what it is, and I think you will too. If you're like me and you love Bloodborne, you want something awesome to play in between setting up your quarterly Bloodborne remaster and Bloodborne 2 summoning circles, we've all been there and I'll be there with you, definitely check out Lies of P. It's a fantastic start from Round 8 Studio and publisher NeoWiz, and I hope it becomes a franchise for years to come. So, what's your take on Lies of P? Are you playing it?
I think that there's no way that they don't try to make another one. Like, the reception from this game was so positive. Like, overall. And, like, the criticism of the game, like, I don't think the game is a 10 out of 10, but I don't think it's anywhere near, like, a 6 out of 10. It's much above that. Like, this is an incredibly good attempt.
Do you love Bloodborne and the Soulsborne and Souls-like genres in general? Celebrate that stuff in the comments below. And until then, for all things video games, and especially Bloodborne, stick with IGN. Good hunter.
Yeah, there you go. They are with Dorothy. Yeah, I think that's what they were implying at the end of the thing, yeah. Lies of P is a 9 out of 10, no less. I would say, personally, I would say probably 8.5. If I had to rate it, I'd say probably 8.5 or so out of 10, maybe 8. It really kind of depends. As I said, I wasn't really a big fan of the bosses. I didn't like how many delay attacks and the wind-ups were weird. I think the animations for the fights were kind of... I think that they were punishing in a way that wasn't really fun. I didn't like that. But overall, as I said, I mean, that's not the only part of the game. That's one component of the game. And again, I think that it's a great game.